Hello, and welcome back to the Isle, where we've got the Hordetest going. Lots of interesting stuff, lots of cool stuff. Though first I'm gonna give a little disclaimer. This video is not about Dibble at all. I know everyone wants Diabloceratops, that's the big deal. But it doesn't have sparring, it has some pretty weird spawns, some balancing stuff going on. It doesn't feel complete, and also everyone and their dog is playing it right now. So migrations end up breaking. It's not really representative of what Dibble is gonna be like. So instead of focusing on that, which I will once sparring gets added to them, because it's like playing Packy without the bonk right now is the analogy I've come up with for it. But for now, I'm going to focus on mutations, which are huge and affect every playable. So even if you're not interested in, the addition of Diabloceratops, mutations are a bit of a game changer. So let's get right into them. And also all the background footage you're seeing here is just from me testing with Pteranodon and Baby. With Pteranodon, we nested multiple generations of Pteranodon to try to test things out. Of course, this is Hordetest. This is the first and second iteration of this Hordetest, so things are constantly changing. They're in flux. Just this last patch, some mutation stuff was added, some was removed, some things are bugged out. All subject to change. I imagine I will make a more comprehensive video once the update proper comes out. But yeah, with no further ado, let's get into it. So to start off, I'm going to explain what I know about mutations. So, whenever you go to your tab screen, your character screen, there's a little tab for mutations. Open that up, and you can see all these hexes here. So what's going on is, whenever you spawn in, or rather, when you reach Juvie as a phase, you can select a mutation from the first slot. You have this whole list, you select one, and boom, they're basically perks for your dinosaur. And as you grow, once you reach subadult, you'll get the second mutation. Once you reach 100% grown full adult, you receive the third one. We don't know currently how you're supposed to unlock the fourth one. As far as I know, it's either supposed to be locked to being an elder whenever they add the elder system, or it's something that you're supposed to have when you get nested in. So let's say you get nested in, then you can have the fourth slot whenever you are fully grown. This is just speculation. I don't know if that is how it's going to work in the future, but one of those two things would track. There's also these two hexes that are grayed out. We don't know how you unlock those, or what will even be in them, etc., etc. Likely to do with the elder system, maybe even nesting. Once again, those are kind of the two things that would explain what we're supposed to have there. Or even if I'm going to go with some wild, just completely out there speculation, maybe one of those will have something to do with having hypers and such. But that's just pure speculation from me. Now you'll notice there are 3 little hexes attached to each big hex. Those are inherited mutations. So whenever you're nested in, you will, at random, I believe is how it is, get one of the traits from your parents that they have in that slot. And so far, I don't believe we can get 2 inherited on one slot as of yet, though that's gotta be how it's going to work once this is fully implemented. So I imagine it will be, first generation, you have 1 inherited. Second generation, you have 2 things inherited on 1 slot. And then third generation, I guess you get that 3rd slot. Oh, another thing I just thought of in regards to the grayed out mutations, that those could be not only things that you unlock when elder, but possibly something that whenever you die as an elder, you die of old age, you live your full life. I believe I've heard somewhere, way back, that elders will allow you to have bonuses when you respawn as that animal. So it could be that the grayed out slots, at least one of them, could be for perks that carry over from the last time you were an elder. Once again, pure speculation. So, alright, let's get into it. I'm going to go down the list of mutations I've seen in the game and I have footage of, and then I am going to read off a few from the list of data mined mutations. some friends shared a post on the Isle Reddit where someone posted all the mutations that are currently in the game's code, at least. Some of them are obviously, not in right now, not functional, or could have functionality in the future with more systems in place that just aren't in the game right now. And this isn't a complete list of mutations, because just in the one patch they've done to Hordetest so far, they added a ton of new mutations. And in the dev blog, they mentioned that they want to add more after this, including species-specific ones. And there's a good bit of speculation to do on those. But right, starting off, we got... Oh, I'm gonna butcher all these names, okay? But let's do it. Let's see, this is... Zero-coal adaptation. Gain some water when eating plants. Now, this one I haven't done anything with personally, but I do know there's a carnivore equivalent of it. And the carnivore equivalent, I was playing Pteranodon, got fish, got 4% thirst after eating a fish hole. Eating one off the ground produced the same result. A very marginal increase. Not all that worthwhile in my opinion, though still an interesting mutation to have. Hypervigilance. Here's carnivore footsteps at extended ranges. So that's an interesting one. I'm curious if it's enough of a difference to justify getting it. Like, if you're like a little Dryo, or even a Galley really, because Galley's whole thing is that it needs, to sprint away from its problems. So, being able to hear your target and discern it from normal Galley schizophrenia, that could be really good for your survivability, because... it says extended ranges value 50%. Now, we don't know, whenever it says value 20%, value 50%, we don't know exactly what it's, a percent of, and how much of an effect that is. But there's definitely some niche use cases on this, and once we get larger dinosaurs with heavier footfalls, it might be very worthwhile. I mean, just off the top of my head, I imagine once we have sauropods in the game, so like Camarasaurus, it'd be very useful to be able to hear a Rex and such before it hears and sees you and ends your run. Moving on, Truculency. Or truculency? No, I'm gonna go with truculency. Bucking drains more attacker stamina. That is probably really, really good for Stego. Right now, the only thing that's a real threat to Stego, especially with its new power swing and such, are Omnipacks. So being able to make Omnipacks less effective towards you is probably a huge thing. That might be a must pick for some larger dinos that don't want raptors to ruin their day. I also imagine it would be really good on Ceratosaurus. Just make it even more of an Omni, just mincing machine. So yeah, very interesting one that helps. It's mostly, actually, yeah, it's pretty much entirely against raptors. Because raptors are the only thing with a pounce that you need to buck from. But then again, raptors are pretty powerful in the right hands, and they're supposed to be, especially once we get Pounce to Pin, which will apparently be coming in this Hordetest. Yeah, this might be seeing a lot of picks, because it is a good counter to raptors. Photosynthetic regeneration regenerates stamina faster during the day. Anything that gives direct combat and balance changes, like they affect that, will be at the top. And along with that is anything to do with stamina, because stamina is your most valuable resource a lot of the time. So the ability to regenerate stamina faster during the day, I mean, even if the value just says 10%, that could be pretty useful, especially on things with very long stamina regen times. And this also affects, just not even sitting down stamina, but just trotting and regaining stamina. That could be a pretty good pick. Cellular regeneration recovers health slightly faster. So I gotta say, it's fine, but most of the time, if you survive a fight or whatever, you can heal off whatever happened. And recovering health slightly faster might not be worth a full mutation slot, considering you only get 4 of them, or even just 3 actually. But still, a little boost, nothing crazy. Could still be very useful. Yeah, if we're looking at herbivores right now, And omnivores and herbivores have the same ones as far as I can tell. I mean, if you're something like a Diablo or Stego, actually Diablo, once we have sparring in and all of that, you injure each other sparring, you might want to be able to heal a bit faster for whenever you do get in a real fight. So yeah, overall a good mutation. Now, advanced gestation. This is an interesting one. Faster egg gestation, incubation, and cooldown rate. And the value is put at 50%. So this is one that won't help you really, but it's more something to carry to the next generation and to make nesting a little bit easier, because your eggs will get out faster, and the incubation will just be faster. Like, everything about nesting will be faster, meaning that you have to spend less time, building up the nest, staying on the eggs, having your diet, your hunger and thirst drain in the middle of that could be very useful. But it's also something that doesn't directly benefit you, really. It's a very specific niche use. But if you have this on what I will call a 0th generation dinosaur, so if we say Pteranodon as an example, because that's what me and my friends have been experimenting with. So if you have a Pteranodon, 2 Pteranodons that spawn from the spawn screen, and at least one of them has this, so it makes your life a bit easier nesting, especially because of the hell that Pteranodon nesting is. But then future generations will have an easier time nesting if they inherit this from you, and then they can pick more mutations that affects their normal gameplay. So very good in a specific niche use. Sustained hydration. Your water drains more slowly, value 20%. This is pretty good, and combined with another one down the line, it is really, really good. Just having water drain more slowly means that you have to go to water less. Minimizes your exposure to Danos, allows you to be in coastal migrations, for example. So like Paki and Diablo appear to have very coastal migrations in places where you don't have water. North Beach and South Beach mudflats. Actually, I wouldn't even call it South Beach, just call it mudflats, everyone calls it. There's no water in those migration zones. You'd have to go all the way somewhere else to get water. Even the East Plains migration, which isn't really in East Plains, it's east of East Plains. So that'll help you make less trips just to and from to get water. Allows you to just not have to be so concerned about it so much. Very good mutation, and the first of the just making survival easier mutations, which I really like. I really like the ones that just make the game a little bit easier on the survival aspect. It's not some combat buff, it's not some must-have thing, it's just, hey, it'd be nice to drink less. I was playing with some friends, and we were all running this along with another mutation later on, and I had one friend that was not running it, and it was clear. He had to go get water so much more often than the rest of us. So yeah, overall, a pretty decent pick. Enlarged meniscus. Increased fall distance before fall damage occurs. An interesting one, I will say, though a bit niche in its uses. So of course the first thought is, okay, Herrerasaurus can possibly benefit from this. They already have very good fall resistance, so just double down on that. Maybe jump higher on the targets for even more damage. The other use case I can think of is also something like Galley. You go very fast. Sometimes you do fly off ledges or cliffs, and Galley already has a little bit of built-in fall resistance already, so it could be very useful to grab that just to double down once again on it. Omni and Troodon are also possibly good use cases, because Omni sometimes you really feel like you should not be breaking your legs from some heights, and you like get on top of rocks and something else hops up there and you gotta run off, so this is possibly a good one for Omni to be able to hop around a bit more freely and not break your legs and just get annihilated for breaking your legs. The other case I can think of is Pteranodon. There is a decent case for Pteranodon taking this, because sometimes you do just fall to your death or fall and break your leg and then you're stuck on the ground. So that is also a decent pick, though, as an experienced Pteranodon player, you can avoid that 90% of the time. so you might want to take other things that will make survival easier just on a day-to-day basis rather than a niche case, but still. And then there's the topic of larger creatures, so like, Carnotaurs. Like Carnotaurus, fall damage is a big deal to them, and I'm not sure if the value on this is high enough to really matter for what happens to Carnotaurs a lot. But you know what? If you're really afraid of taking fall damage, you might just want to put one in here. Though there's definitely some other perks vying for that slot. And here we go with another good survival one, Efficient Digestion. Your food drains more slowly, value 20%. I have tested this with Herrerasaurus, and it seems pretty good. It's just a general survivability increase. Because one thing, I don't know if I say it on this channel, but I say it a lot, at least outside of it, is that starvation is the absolute worst way to die in these games. Because starving means that you didn't die from a fight, you didn't die from engaging in the game's mechanics, you died because of a lack thereof. You died from not having fun, not being able to interact with the game systems. So, avoiding that, anything that lets you avoid that is very good. Gives you more breathing room, allows you more time as a herbivore before you got eaten. As a carnivore, it means that you can spend more time between hunts. You can pick and choose your battles maybe a little bit more rather than being forced to hunt every single thing you see, because you never know when you're gonna see something else to eat. Now, if you pass up any opportunity, then that could be a slow, painful death down the line. I know it's especially good with Herrerasaurus because it is somewhat of an ambush hunter. So you spend a long time waiting for meals sometimes, and it can really help you. I mean, especially if you take this right off the bat, you get your first meal, you get filled up, and then you don't have to go out and get food again until you are a decent size. And I didn't have any issues getting diet while I was at it. Now, granted, whenever I was testing this, I was eating from organs, but I was really not having an issue with diets, draining too slow or too fast, and it being affected by me being too full to get my diets back. It seemed fine, though, of course, I only have a very, very small sample size of that. Overall, great mutation. Like, I hate starvation, so I'm probably going to pick this a lot. Featherweight. Your footprints fade much faster, and the value is set to 50%. It'll be hard for you to tell how much of an effect it's had, because tracking can be very powerful, definitely can be, though how often you're hunted and you get got because they followed your tracks, it can be a bit of a, I don't really know. So, possibly useful, but I'm just trying to think of the use case of, yeah, I want this over many other things. Because big, slow things that leave really big, noticeable footprints, well, you're big and slow anyways, so you're going to be seen visually. You're not really going to hide. Maybe for Omni, maybe Galley, though then again tracking galleys can be somewhat good if you know they're on low stamina, but they can just outrun you, get just way out anyways. Very niche use, but despite being a very niche use, it is a good mutation. It's a good example of what you can have as a mutation, just little buffs for your creature. Do you think that you're getting tracked down a lot? You think people are tracking me down with my footsteps, I just can't escape people? Then maybe take this. Osteoclerosis. Resist or reduce fracture damage. So that's an interesting one, because right now there's only two sources of fracture damage. Fall damage and Packy bonks. So, could be useful on Packy, prevent friendly fire instances from each other. So, you bonk your Packy friend, you don't break their leg and ruin their day in the middle of a fight. Could also be very useful if you want to hunt Packies, if you're playing as an Omni and you want to go and hunt Packies and maybe not have your leg broken. I imagine it could stack with the fall damage one if you just really do not want to break your leg from falls ever without just outright dying. So could have a use there, for sure. But outside of Packy and Omni, maybe Carno as well, maybe. That's definitely another case. It's really a perk that just revolves around what's your relation with Packies. but still a very decent mutation. Just, little buff for your creature to specialize it a little bit in a certain way. I like it. Intraspecific aggression. Deal more damage to animals of your own species. So already, instantly, you've thought of cannibalistic species. Deinosuchus, Ceratosaurus. They're cannibalistic. They gain from killing each other. They gain a lot from killing each other. In fact, Deinosuchus, it's kind of a huge deal that they kill each other constantly and eat each other. So, this is a must pick. Because if you have two, same-sized Deinosuchuses fight each other, if one has this perk and the other one doesn't, the one with it wins. Unless they do something really stupid, they have a bonus, just a flat bonus to damage. So you will have to take this as creatures that PvP with each other a lot. Also could see people running this on something like Dibble with the sparring. Maybe that's something you'll see a bit. And, it's good. It's a goated mutation. Though I will say, in my personal opinion, I do not like it. I do not like flat buffs like this, especially against your own species. There's no conditions to it other than it's just same species, meaning that, right, if I get into a fight with someone else who is equivalent to me, who is playing the same thing, is equivalent to me in every way, I will almost certainly win that fight. So that rubs me the wrong way a little bit, because this is going to be the must-have if you're going, Cannibal Omni with Cannibal mutation that I'm going to show later. Then this would be a must-pick. If you're playing Ceratosaurus, a must-pick. If you're playing Deinosuchus, must-have. I think it's going to be too powerful. They're either going to have to tone it down or remove it, in my opinion, because this thing is going to be extremely powerful. And, of course, assist in the normal trolling, cannibaloling, all of that good stuff. So, plenty of toxicity to be had in the future with this one. Epidermal fibrosis. Increased bleed resistance. A value of 15% here. So this one could be really good on things that suffer from bleed from Omni. Packy could really benefit from this. Galley can benefit from this quite a bit. One of the big threats to Galley is being pounced by raptors, and the bleed is what will get you if the Omni attacks don't. So just flat out increasing that, very powerful. Stegosaurus as well could have a good matchup with Omni, just tanking the bleed a bit more. I imagine as well Carno could benefit, because the Carno versus Tenno matchup, bleed is no joke from Tenno, so Carno might really benefit from having a little bit of resistance in that regard, because they do run a lot during fights. So overall, good perk, there's decent use cases for it, and I don't think it would be too crazy powerful. It's more of, do I want a contingency for the situation that I'm being bled a lot? So, very interesting perk, I like it. Congenital hypoglycia. Reduce incoming damage when fighting larger species. Value 15%. Now, this is a really interesting one, because it's more powerful the smaller you are, really. This is going to be a must-have for Troodon, because anything that can increase Troodon's survivability in a fight is a must-have. So because Troodon is smaller than practically everything, this is what you want. I don't know the exact values or how good it is in general, but if this can allow you to tank a hit from a Tenno or an Omni that would have otherwise one-shot you, worth it 100% to take. I imagine this is also really good with Omni, because it is on the smaller side of the roster, and it is built, as well as Troodon, to fight things bigger than it. It's supposed to go after a lot of things that are bigger and have a pack, a group, hunting. So the ability to shrug off even just one hit more than you could before is amazing, because that's what can allow you to disengage, get out of the fight, live to fight another day, heal while the rest of the pack does the work. I also imagine that this is going to be very useful once larger animals get added to the roster. So, once we have Allosaurus, how is Dibble going to fare against Allosaurus? We don't really know, but Allosaurus is probably going to have a decent advantage, but when you have something like this mutation, working for it, perhaps it's a more even fight. So overall, a very good, possibly very powerful perk, though it does have its limits. It definitely has its limits. Playing as Pteranodon, I've seen people that have taken this still get one shot by baby Diablos. So mileage may vary, because some things are just so weak that even small attacks are still just way too much for it to survive. Actually, another thing that this could be good for is Herrerasaurus, come to think of it. Or even just Dryosaurus. Just anything small really benefits from this. Overall, pretty good perk, I like it. Photosynthetic tissue, faster health / locked health recovery, and higher move speed during the day, value 5%. Now, the health recovery, locked health, sure, it's fine and good and all, but higher move speed is massive. It's massive because it affects balance fundamentally. So, I have heard from people that if you have a Ceratosaurus with this, it can catch up to Nontosauruses that don't have this, which can fundamentally change how a fight works between the two, how a hunt works between the two. So this thing, even at its low value, small changes to speed have a massive butterfly effect on fights and balancing. And you have this during the day, so just anytime you can see, really, it'll be fine. So very powerful. Very, very powerful. I think this is going to be one of those must-have perks, because anything that affects movement speed is crazy powerful. Now, we're going to have to see if it remains around, because I've already heard of a lot of balance concerns regarding it. Though you can definitely get some interesting stuff going when you get the really fast creatures. Galley or Carno with this are lightning fast. You're just giving them that little bit of extra speed to things already fast. Very powerful perk. And then we have the nighttime equivalent, Nocturnal. Exact same thing, but for nighttime. So this is a must-have for Dilophosaurus, a must-have for Troodon. Any sort of night hunter, you want this. You want to be more powerful at night. You want to be faster at night. You want to heal more at night. That's just what you want as those creatures, so it's a no-brainer that nocturnal animals pick the Nocturnal mutation. Hydro-regenerative. Recover health faster during rain, value 25%. So that seems to allow you to get pretty fast health regen if you're in the rain, which is pretty interesting. I have not tested this myself. It rains pretty often, though it's only effective when it's raining. If it's not raining, you get nothing out of this. The real question about this is how effective is it in the middle of a fight, in the middle of a hunt? Because if this regens your health a good amount, even whenever you're just having little lulls in combat, in a long, drawn-out fight, that could be supremely powerful. Because, that value seems pretty high, and given how other perks that regenerate health, there's one I will mention much later that is broken in its current iteration, this might just be extremely powerful. Though I don't know. As a concept, perfectly fine. Rely on environmental conditions to help you out a little bit. I like that kind of thing, so you can spec into it, and then when it rains, it's not just like, oh, it's raining, it's, oh, hey, I can heal faster during this. That's kind of nice. I have a little bonus. I am curious about the case for Deinosuchus, trying to get to different water sources. Going out on land is taking damage, but is in the rain. How much it fights against that kind of thing. Like, how much can this fight against, starvation or dehydration, health loss? Because that could be very interesting. But it's a niche ability. You only get it when it's raining. So, Maybe that balances it out quite a bit. We will have to see. Increased inspiratory capacity. Increased O2 capacity, value 15%. So only really useful with semi-aquatics. Because everything else, the only time you have to worry about O2 is you run out of stamina in the middle of water and you're drowning, or a Deinosuchus drags you in water to drown you. And in the Deinosuchus case, most of the time it's not the O2 capacity that's really killing you. It's the Deinosuchus, when they get low on stam, realizing they're not going to drown you, they'll just take you to the bottom of whatever body of water and bite you to death. So not too useful on most things. The two right now that benefit are Bapi and Deino. And considering some of the things that Bapi could get, increased O2 capacity isn't the biggest deal for Bapi because all it has to do is breach once and it has all of its oxygen back. But for Deinosuchus, this is really good. This is a really good mutation for Deinosuchus because, I mean, if you've watched, Deinosuchus YouTube, if you watch Defeat Pete, you will see the times there's a lot of tension because he's low on oxygen right when an opportunity comes knocking. So I imagine this is going to be very popular among Deinosuchus players so that they can stay underwater just that little bit longer because that can be the difference between a meal and starvation. Very good perk. I like it. I've said it already a little bit. I love perks like this that just enhance some ability of your dinosaur. A lot of dinosaurs don't get much out of it, but some niche cases really do well. This could possibly be really good for Minmi when it comes out, for all the Spinosaurids, Baryonyx, Suchomimus, Spinosaurus, Ostroraptor. Ostroraptor might have a great time with this, who knows? And then we have Hydrodynamic. Increased swimming speed, value 15%. So this is the craziest speed buff out of all of them, and I'll just say it's a must-have for Bapi. If you're playing Bapi, you are choosing this. If you choose something else, you have chosen wrong, because increased swim speed for Bapi is everything. It makes it feel so much better. Just swimming around, breaching, you will save stamina. In terms of just, distance traveled, you'll travel further for the same amount of stamina. You're traveling quicker, it'll help you escape Deinos, it'll help you traverse the map. It is insanely good for Bapi, and I tested it. I found randoms whenever I was testing with Bapi, and we did a race. And I'll put it on screen right now. You can see how I am leaving them in the dust. That is the difference that this makes. For other creatures, very niche cases. Besides, Deinosuchus. Deinosuchus could definitely benefit from this. This could be the difference between getting got by other Deinos and escaping, because if you're just faster than them in the water, you can swim away. Though, this is vying for a slot along with, oxygen, along with a thing that just makes you straight up better at combat with other Deinos. So, there's definitely gonna be some interesting plays with that. And also, faster in water means that you can take advantage of opportunities that are further away with Deino. So, very good pick for them. Everyone else, though, not really sure how useful it is. Most creatures don't go swimming all that often. They don't go crossing water all that often. Maybe Tenontosaurus, because Tenontosaurus already has a pretty good swim speed. Actually, Ceratosaurus as well has a decent swim speed. So you could maybe see that play in there. Herrerasaurus, come to think of it, also has a good use case because it can dive, because it can go out and get fish, and it's somewhat slow. So maybe if you want a aquatic Herrera that really just wants to eat fish and survive off of them, you get increased swim speed. Though I'm not sure if the value would be enough for Herrera to do much against the Deinosuchus flying at it. I now realize I forgot whenever I was talking about, increased oxygen. Herrerasaurus could benefit from increased oxygen because it can dive underwater, but it has really bad breath capacity. So there might be a case for an aquatic Herrerasaurus to take, hydrodynamic and increased inspiratory capacity, just really spec into being more at home in the water than you would otherwise be. Overall, Hydrodynamic is a really powerful perk, and now I know what I said about just even what I believe is a 5% speed boost being absolutely insane, and they might have to balance it a lot or remove it. But hydrodynamic, because it's only limited to water, I think it can possibly remain at the pretty high value it has, because it only really affects a small number of creatures. And other creatures that aren't, aquatic focused, if they take this, then they're specializing into a niche case and not something that will help their overall survival. So there's a case to be made that it can stay at its current value, its current strength. In a similar manner to Deinosuchus gets to be so powerful because he's restricted to water, this ability might be able to stay this powerful because it's restricted to water. And then we have Aqua Goggles, the third of the aquatic mutations so far. Increased underwater vision range. Now, the value only says 5%, though we don't know exactly how much that is. Could be pretty useful. I did not test this when I was playing Baby, but I know for a fact that Herrerasaurus has really bad vision underwater. So maybe this would clear things up enough to where you could see a Deinosuchus coming from a mile away. Or maybe not a mile away, but enough of a distance that you can react and get out of the water. For Deinosuchus, this could maybe be the difference between seeing another Dino before it sees you. For Baby, it could be the difference between seeing a Dino before it sees you. It's absolutely useless for anything that is, that can't dive, because you can't see underwater at all anyways. Or maybe it does affect them, I don't know. But, going from nothing to 5% better than nothing sounds like you're still just at nothing. So this would need some testing to see if it works on some other creatures. But with my base knowledge of it, if you're really going for that aquatic build for Herrera, or you're really going for that, just having all the aquatic things for, your semi-aquatics, could be a good choice. And once again, I'll say, I like stuff like this. Just makes you more at home in a niche environment. That's just a good idea for a mutation. And here we have reabsorption, recovering a small amount of water during rainy weather. The value is set to 1. Oh boy, this thing's powerful. Especially if you combine it with the less water drain in general. From my experience playing Pteranodon with this thing, I took it in the middle of a rainstorm, and by the time it was done, I got 30% of my water back, 30 to 40%. You don't have to drink if there's rain, basically is what happens. Not only does it counteract your natural water drain, but it will increase the amount of water you're gaining in your stomach. So just if it's raining, you don't have to drink. If it's raining, then you might not have to drink for a while because it's effectively like drinking, but you're just out and about. With how often it rains a lot of the time, you could go a very long time without drinking. You combine this with less water drain, you can sometimes just wait between rainstorms and not have to drink for in-game days, for just hours. You can go and not have to drink once, because just every time you get low, it happens to rain. And then boom, you're back up to top by the end of the storm. Very good. Very, very good. And also has niche uses on things like Deinosuchus. Means that Deinosuchus can have a much larger range on land during rainstorms. So if you can't reach a certain body of water normally, you might just wait until it rains, and then you can survive without dehydrating to get a certain distance. It is a very good perk, and once again, something that's restricted to a weather condition, and I really like that. It makes the world feel more interactive when stuff as simple as weather is more than a visual effect, but has a gameplay effect on you. Though even with that said, I think it could be nerfed. There's a possibility of it because of how good it is, how fast it will just completely regenerate your thirst. If this perk just simply was enough to simply counteract your thirst drain, and that's all it was capable of doing, it would still be pretty good, because that would mean that just anytime it rains, you wouldn't have to worry about thirst. But the fact that it regenerates along with that makes it extremely powerful as a survival perk. Very useful. I like it. I'm taking it with Pteranodon. Infrasound communication. Make significantly less noise when talking in chat, and the value is at 50%. Possibly a pretty useful mutation. Just you will not believe how often people die because they talk in chat. People really do forget that you make noise when you talk. And noise is something that predators will follow to find you and kill you and eat you. So making less noise when you chat, very useful. It can definitely allow you to survive a bit. I'm not sure if it's functional at the moment. We tried a little bit of testing, but it is one of those things that can be somewhat difficult to try to test. Once again, like many other things, pretty niche. If you're just in a voice call, then it doesn't matter. But still, an interesting perk. This is something, you know, if you are playing solo and you're grouping with randoms, it could be useful to be able to talk with less likelihood that you're going to be found out because of it. If you're playing as something like Herrera, you know, ambush hunting with like randoms, very useful to be able to talk without tipping off people that you're around. Overall, a great idea for a mutation, and in some situations may hold its own against some of the other ones here. Okay, this next one, Wader. Less hindered when wading through shallow water, value 25%. This is an extremely niche one. Semi-aquatics are already not really all that affected by wading, and the area that you wade in is a very thin strip between land and water. So I'm not sure how useful this is on 90% of creatures. The best use case I can think of for this mutation would be some playables not in the game yet. Ostroraptor perhaps, Baryonyx, Suchomimus, Dinocyrus, things that are already designed to be waders, though I would hope that they would have some innate amount of like this perk already. So I don't know. There's not really, like, some mutations can be extremely powerful because they're only effective in water or during rain, you know, because they have limited use. But wader is such a niche. It is, I mean, it's a niche within a niche. Like, water itself is a niche, but the area between water and land, that is, I'm not really sure. Like, it's a good concept. I like the concept of something that just helps you traverse certain terrain better. But for this one specifically, I mean, maybe when there's some other playables around, it'll be good. But right now, I don't think I can justify taking it on anything, really. Now, here's a really interesting one. Barometric sensitivity. Receive an indication prior to storms or droughts. Now, in the current build of the game, this is not functional. I've seen people say that they've taken it, they've tested it, they don't get any sort of indication. And right now, there is no reason to take it. Anything that relies on storms, so like your mutations for regen during storms, drink from rainwater during storms, those mutations, I mean, knowing that a storm is coming isn't going to affect you all that much. I mean, it can affect how you interact with the world maybe a little bit, because you'll go, oh, I won't go for a drink, a storm's about to come, or oh, hey, I can get in a fight because a storm's about to come. But, I don't know, like, you'd be using a whole nother mutation slot just to make one mutation you already have slightly more effective, or just slightly more convenient. Like, there's not a use case for this, even if it was functional in the current game. But this is potentially extremely useful in the future. If storms affect Pteranodon flight in the future, for example, it would be extremely useful to know when a storm is coming, to know when you need to hunker down or you need to get that last little bit of food or water before the rain comes in. Currently, Pteranodon does not have this perk. I think it's exclusive to herbivores and omnivores, but that can change in the future. Though the really interesting thing is droughts. We don't have droughts in the game currently. So right now, you know, it's worthless, but in the future, don't quote me on this, but I believe that at some point in the future they want to have like weather conditions like droughts where the water level in lakes and rivers will go down. And that could be really good for semi-aquatics to know when a drought is happening. or for just things that have really bad thirst drain to know, like, oh, right, there's a drought that's going to happen, we need to move out. You know, a Deinosuchus could go, oh no, my little pond is going to shrink, I should head out onto land, get to a bigger body of water before this thing completely shrivels up and I'm left... Like, what's that little amphibian thing in that one episode of Walking with Monsters? You know the one I'm talking about, the Permian extinction. You don't want to end up like that thing. You want to survive, so you're going to get out into another body of water. Could also be helpful for baby, perhaps, just any semi-aquatics, really, to know that, right, my environment is going to shrink, so I need to prepare for that. If that is indeed what happens, could be pretty useful. Right now, useless, doesn't have any purpose, but in the future could be a really good perk, and I love the concept of this. I love perks like this. It just gives you more information about your environment so you can react to it, so that you can prepare your future survival. Love it. Social behavior. Increased group size only applies to group leader, value 1. As far as I know, this only applies to herbivores at the moment. Don't quote me on that, though. I haven't been able to play, every playable and see what they all have, but generally it seems like mutations are divided between herbivores and carnivores currently. Pretty useful. If you just want a group to have one more person in it, if you want to nest, it could be useful to have. If you want, if you have one more friend than would be normally allowed in whatever, in the group of whatever animal you're playing, go ahead and take it. Only the group leader needs this. So, you could just have, one guy bites the bullet and takes this, and everyone else is better off for it. So, it's interesting. I'd like to see, if it's not already on them, because I don't know, but I don't think it is. If it's not on, like, Omniraptor or Troodon, I think it should be applied to them. Things that are supposed to be, big pack hunters can have even more. It would make sense for them. But... pretty good perk. Once again, I'm saying this over and over again on a broken record. Niche case to use, but very useful. Tactile endurance. Convert incoming damage to stamina. Value 50%. Just being able to gain stamina from being hurt. If you gain a somewhat significant amount of stamina, this is good for something that can run away. So, a galley. That could be that extra little bit of stamina you need to survive, to run away. And also, if you're playing as something tanky, something that wants to fight, then this could be really good. If you're playing a Stegosaurus, you could possibly be more liberal with your stamina, because whenever anything does damage to you, you get a little bit back. So that means, more ability to move around a little bit faster, more ability to do your swings and such. Like, if you're something tanky that's taking a lot of damage, and, can deal with taking a lot of damage, very useful, I'd imagine, just to stay alive, keep in the fight, even if you're not using your stamina the best, or even if you just have people that are doing a lot of damage to you. With Stegosaurus, as the example again, you can use that stamina to buck, and that could be huge whenever your opponents aren't regenerating their stamina. They're not getting stamina from taking damage. Things on the smaller side, though, like Baby, you're not getting any use out of this. Anything that's fighting you is going to one-shot you, two-shot you, maybe three-shot you. So converting that damage into a little bit of extra stamina isn't a big deal, really. Gastronomic regeneration. Eating restores a small amount of health. Now, it says small amount of health. The value says 10%. I've heard that currently, in the current build of Hordetest, that this thing is busted. That this thing is busted beyond belief. I have heard that in a couple bites, a Ceratosaurus can go from red to full health. Just a few bites of anything seems to do the trick. So I don't know exactly what's going on with it, but in the current Hordetest build, this thing is absolutely... it's ridiculous. And it's worth saying that I believe all the values of mutations in the current Hordetest build is for testing purposes. They are cranked up to 11 on some of them. I'm not going to say it might be nerfed, it will be nerfed. There is no way it's staying in its current state, because the ability to just fully heal off a fight in less than a minute just by eating, that is wild. And in fact, I don't know if it's been tested with grazing with herbivores, if that does anything, but yeah. Outside of it being busted, so if we ignore that right now it's extremely powerful, let's say it gets brought down to a reasonable level. How good would this be? Possibly pretty good. I mean, even if it's not regenerating your full health bar in 30 seconds or less. Still, carnivores hunt something, you get injured in the fight, it could be really good to be all healed up by the time you're done with the corpse. By the time you're ready for the next hunt, you're already healed up, you're ready to go for the next fight. Could be very useful for carnivores in that regard. Herbivores, on the other hand, you have plenty of access to food. So, I mean, you could have that. You're a Stegosaurus, you get in a fight with a bunch of Omnis, you barely make it out alive. I mean, you have a really long time to heal, so maybe it would be useful in that case. So, if it was brought down to a reasonable level like that, it would be a reasonably good perk to take, regardless. And here we have another interesting one. Traumatic thrombosis. Prevents death from blood loss if resting. That can be huge for some things. For example, Galley. So Galley, one of its main predators, is Omniraptor. And its main source of damage on them, on things at times, can be bleed. It'll pounce you, it'll pin you, it'll do a lot of damage, but do a lot of bleed. A single Omni can't really kill a Galley with one pounce. What it's relying on is to pounce you, and then you will try to run away, but you will tick down a ludicrous amount of bleed. You will be forced to rest. They can follow your blood trail, follow your tracks, and get you. But if you can't die from blood loss, that means you could run yourself to the point of just about to die of bleed, like the screen starting to go black, and then sit down. That might be enough distance for you to survive, heal off that bleed, and get going again. So it could be very useful in that regard for something like Galley to make it much more survivable against solo Omnis. For larger things that worry about bleed from Omni as well, could be pretty good. Because let's say we have a Diabloceratops, we have a Stegosaurus. If they're in a group, so let's say, one's been focused down by Omnis, it's bleeding a lot, and they're running low on blood, you could potentially just have them sit down, everyone gather around them, guard them while they heal off the bleed. And that way they'll have to come in and just do raw damage to try to kill that person instead of bleeding them. It could be interesting. It could be really good in those cases. Only other thing I have to say about this perk is I like it. It's something that affects you in only a specific situation, but can be a game changer. It can be that little bit, that tiny little push you need to change from a situation where you would die to one where you can barely scrape by and live. Unfortunately, when I was doing my testing for herbivores / omnivores, the third mutation slot was not working for Baby. So I don't know if there's anything different there. There might have been, but right now in the current build, it's just not working for some creatures. Alright, starting things off for carnivore, we have Hemomania. Do flat extra damage on a bleeding target, value 5%. Okay, that's a really good one for bleeders. That is, most attacks do bleed anyways, so... of course, Omni, your target's gonna be bleeding if you're playing Omni, so it's a no-brainer to take this. Cerato benefits from it, just a bite does bleed. Carno benefits, bite does bleed. Troodon, really all the carnivores. Any carnivores that are doing any serious fighting, it's just flat damage. That is powerful. And once again, I will say I'm personally not the biggest fan of flat damage, because people will want just flat damage over a lot of more interesting things. Sure, you can say, oh, it relies on a status effect like bleed, but then you have to realize that almost every attack does bleed. So, yeah. Hematophagi? Wait, is that Hematophagi? Right? Or Hemophagy? Hematophagy, I think. Okay, yeah, that's it. Restores some thirst when eating. Value 25%. I have tried this with Pteranodon. Eating a fish would only net me 4% thirst. And eating the fish like off the ground, like, not eating it whole, netted me the same result. Whenever I was going around, even eating other things, it didn't really seem to have that much of an effect. It appeared really marginal. So in comparison to stuff like, drinking rainwater and having just less thirst in general, both of those are just better than this in every way. And I mean, sure, if you want the ultimate, never thirsty build, I guess you could stack this on top of those, but it's so marginal. Like, I can't stress enough how marginal it is. That's really not worthwhile in the slightest, in my opinion. It's interesting, okay, regain thirst whenever you're eating something. But yeah, for carnivores, that is just nah. Accelerated Prey Drive. Deal more damage to animals with low health. Value 10%. Now, this is an interesting one. So it has, a flat damage increase, okay? And possibly double. I mean, if we just take the value percentages as just straight up more percent damage, if we're assuming that's what it is, it's twice as effective as Hemomania, but only effective on targets with low health. Now, we don't know what the threshold for low health is. If we were to just assume, just pulling this out of nowhere, let's assume that low health is wounded. So, if they have the wounded status effect, then they're considered to be low health. Then that would maybe be really good for something that has a big burst of damage and then has to wear things down from there. So your ambush predators would do really well with that. Carno, for example. Carno wants to get a big chunk of damage done at the start and then wear down the target from there. So, you get the charge off, you do that, and then you start dealing a flat 10% more damage to the already weakened target. That could be good. But for a persistence hunter like Omni, maybe not so much, because most of the time you're just dealing flat, increments of damage from beginning to end, and you're wanting to either get them with bleed or wear down their health over a long period of time of combat, rather than dealing a bunch of damage and then getting a decisive few hits afterwards. There's an argument for Herrerasaurus, maybe, though Herrerasaurus is really reliant on getting that first hit in. Like, that second hit, maybe you'd be wanting bleed to do more of the work there, but it would be pretty effective. But then again, if you already got something low on health from a Herrera dive bomb, do you really need an extra 10% to finish them off with another dive bomb? So, mileage may vary if you're trying for that, but yeah. I mean, it's a damage boost, so very powerful, but it's only limited to when you've already gotten someone down to low health, so you're not getting any damage boost for the first however so long of the fight, so it's only at the end that you gain this power boost. So might be, for a damage boosting mutation, it might be pretty balanced because of that, because you already have to get the target really low before it comes into effect. So pretty interesting. Definitely keep an eye on this one. And one thing to take note of is that there are a lot of shared mutations between herbivores and carnivores, so I don't know how I'm going to edit this in the end. If I'm just going to put them all one after another, who knows. Hypermetabolic inanition? Is that what it is? Hypermetabolic inanition. Okay. The less hunger you have, the more damage you deal. Value 15%. That's really powerful if we're just considering this to be, a flat damage increase. We don't know the exact thresholds, of course, of like when do you get the 15%? Do you have to be starving to get it, or do you have to be on like 10%? We don't know. A lot of the time, you're hunting on low hunger, because one, well, you want to eat, and two, because food can be so hard to find, so that could be somewhat consistent. A consistent boost of possibly up to 15% damage, if I'm reading this correctly. That might be extremely powerful. Now, of course, when you're full, you would deal less damage. But then again, if you're full, why are you fighting stuff as a carnivore, So, possibly a little bit of controlling player action through gameplay incentives, come to think of it. Because if you take this, then if you're a hungry carnivore hunting, you are much more effective at hunting than when you already well-fed carnivore hunting. Now, this is the kind of thing where, I mean, let's say you took this with, I don't know, let's say Serrato. Let's say a Serrato took this, and then another Serrato comes up to, fight for the body. Like, if you're already full, you might want to just run, because if this guy has, a massive damage boost while he's, low on hunger, you might just want to let him have it. Like, yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I'm not really a fan of flat damage boosts. This one, I don't know how I feel about it, because it sounds interesting. We can corral player behavior using it. But the issue is carnivores are hungry a lot. And, I mean, it just means, will there become a bit of a meta of keeping your hunger lower to try to do more damage? Which, granted, that would make it harder to survive with people trying to do that. But, I don't know. And that value seems pretty high if it's what I think it is. We'll have to see. But keep an eye on that one. That one could be very interesting when it goes live. Okay, and here we have the last one I have seen personally in the game. Well, last normal mutation I've seen in the game so far. And that is Reinforced Tendons. Jumping costs less stamina, value 10%. I found this on Pteranodon, on its, I believe, the third set of mutations on it. I want to like this. I want it to be good, but testing it with Pteranodon, the value is like 10%. I don't know exactly how that all, pans out. Testing it on Pteranodon, it saved 0.6% stamina on jump, I think. So it saved 0.6% stamina on jump. And on takeoff, I believe, as well, though it was a bit weird trying to see if it did actually affect takeoff or not. And I've gotta say, at least for Pteranodon, maybe for other carnivores, it could be worth it, maybe. Raptors, Troodon could maybe get some good stuff out of it. But for Pteranodon, absolutely worthless. You would have to use your entire stam bar up jumping to save enough stamina from this mutation to get one extra jump in. The vast majority of stam that Pteranodon loses is from flight. I mean, if you're taking off, you lose 8%? No, wait, not nowadays. It's 6% stamina? Yeah. You lose 6% of your stamina, something like that, whenever you take off. And you'll lose the rest trying to go faster or ascending. Ascending is the big thing that loses you stamina. The jumping itself is not. And even when you're in a situation where you are taking off, landing, taking off a ton, I just can't see the scenario where you want to land and take off more than 10 times in a row to make this thing even get you one more jump. And what's that jump gonna do for a Pteranodon with no stam? Just about nothing. So sadly, gotta say, at least in its current iteration, not good. Not worth it whatsoever. Maybe Omni or maybe Troodon can get something out of this. And now we move on to a special mutation that isn't acquired through normal means. I will thank Jelly Butter here for being the first in my group of friends to confirm this. So here we have Reniculate Kidneys. Can drink salt water. I think I'll make a video showing off how you do this. Though not gatekeep it now. Just basically you drink salt water until it works. And it takes a slot, just the same as the other thing, so you have to have a slot open to take this thing. I believe you can take it in any slot, the first, second, or third. I don't believe it's limited in any of those, though I would recommend you go for it either right before you know you're getting your sub-adult slot, or whenever you know you're going to get your full adult slot, because the first slot, if you don't take your mutation before the next slot opens, you've just lost that mutation slot. You can't get a mutation there anymore. So there's a bit of a time limit on things. But yeah, I'll make a video showing off a method to the madness of getting this thing. But to say what it is, drinking salt water, amazing for certain builds. Like this, you could have a saltwater Dano, which currently in the Hordetest is viable due to Dibble shenanigans with its spawns and sanctuaries and such, and the current hotspot being in a place with salt water. Outside of that, very niche. I mean, in the current build of the game, drinking salt water is very niche, unless you are a coastal animal. So for Packy, for Dibble, where your migrations are on the coast far from water, yes, this is, I'd almost say, a must-have. When you get the opportunity to get this thing, get it, because it will make your life so much easier to not have to run all the way to another water source, all the way to fresh water to drink. You can just drink from the ocean. I mean, it's a game changer. You know, if you're in the North Beach migration, you don't have to go back to Northeast Plains. If you're in the South, Mudflats migration, you don't have to go all the way to South Plains. You don't have to go all the way to West Rail Axis. You can just drink from the ocean right there. Pteranodon can really benefit from this because it can just go wherever it wants. Though, granted, it can also drink fresh water from just about anywhere on the map if it feels like it, so not too essential. But if you want to be more of a coastal pteranodon, if you want to be living off of sea turtles and crabs more than you are schooling fish, like, it can be a pretty useful mutation. But for other things, I don't see it being that useful. Like Stegosaurus, for example. It mostly lives in highlands, lives in swamp. It's got all the water it needs in nearby places. It's not near salt water most of the time, so not worthwhile getting. You know, if you're a, Galley, I mean, its migrations aren't really near salt water either. Like, you gotta look at what the creature is. Though, one interesting thing is, if you got a saltwater baby, crab foraging points do spawn in the ocean. So even though there aren't fish in the ocean, you can survive off of crabs. So that would allow Baby to survive anywhere in the entire ocean. Now, there's nothing to do out there, but it's possible. It is possible to survive with Baby. I mean, heck, you could go to, the big islands down to, the southeast and just live there if you so felt like it. I feel like this is going to become much more useful in the future whenever we have, more stuff on that island to the southeast, whenever you have more stuff going on in saltwater areas. But, yeah, this is an extremely good mutation for some animals, for things that live on the coasts. This is a must-have. And there's a bit of suffering that goes into getting it, but it is well worth it, because, say goodbye to ever dying to Danos again with this thing. I mean, that's just safe water forever for you, really. So, fantastic mutation, and I'm gonna say I love it as, just from a design standpoint, a mutation of this changes your playstyle. It changes how you can survive, makes you more survivable in certain environments, but more so, it's not something you just pick, it's not a perk that you just select, and it's like, okay, now I can drink salt water. No, you have to go out of your way to drink the salt water, deal with the debuffs and possible vomiting that comes with that, asterisk on that, because I did not vomit one time while I was getting this mutation. And my friend that did it, he did it with Deinosuchus, so he couldn't vomit, even if the game wanted him to. So I don't know if you vomit when drinking salt water. Just to be safe, I say you will. So you need a good method to survive all of that. You really earned this mutation. You didn't just select the mutation, you earned it. And I really like that, so great mutation. Alright, from this point onwards, I am going to be looking at mutations that were in the whole, data mine thing on the Isle Reddit. So I'm gonna read down the ones I recognize that I haven't seen in the game. Now, disclaimer, these are data mine things. They're not in the game right now. We don't know how they function. We don't know if there's anything crazy going on with them that we don't know. A lot of these don't have values like what, I could show off with my gameplay. So these we know even less about the true extent of them. But I'll give my opinions on them anyways. So we got Melarhiostosis. Increase blunt damage towards fractures. So this would only, in the current build of the game, the only thing this would really be good for is Packy. If you're playing Packy, pick this. If you're not, don't pick it. It's the only thing that can do fracture damage. Once we have more things that do fracture damage, maybe Rex even, could benefit from this. So, who knows? Keep an eye on it. You know what I like about it? It's not a flat damage increase, but it's increasing a specific kind of damage. I guess that's why I'd like, if there was something that increased the bleed you deal, I wouldn't mind that as much as like flat damage increases. Like stuff that's not just a flat damage increase, but increases secondary bits of damage, I like a lot more. They allow you to spec into more interesting builds and specialize in certain things rather than going, I have bigger damage number, you know? Then we have passive disposition, chance to not disturb natural alarms. So natural alarms, that is, I believe, what was it, the last Hordetest, there was like a bush or two that would spawn like a million pterodactyls whenever you ran into them and like make a bunch of noise. I think that's what a natural alarm is. It's gonna be like stuff like that, sort of scattered around the map, so that would make you not trigger them. Of course, because we don't have natural alarms implemented, I can't give a good assessment of how good this mutation is. If it's something that, I mean, if we were to say, let's say a T-Rex is stalking through the woods and it triggers a natural alarm, that makes herbivores look over and go, rut-row, let's get out of here, there's something triggering, you know, alarms, we don't know what it is. Maybe it'd be good to have on some things, on some ambush predators on land, like maybe even like a Carno could benefit from it, depending on how common natural alarms are and how good they are at, well, being alarms. As a mutation, I like it. It's just one of those unique things, you know, something that nobody who was like predicting mutations would have come up with this, because we don't even have natural alarms. We don't even know exactly what they are or how they work, what the intended design of them is. So it's interesting, get some speculation going. Now here's an interesting one. Osteophagic. Able to consume bones to regenerate fractures faster. That is extremely interesting, because one, you're regenerating fractures, so I mean, okay. At the moment, the only use case is fall damage or a packy bonk to you. The big thing, I think, is does this allow you to consume bones if you're not a scavenger? So, would a Ceratosaurus and Deinosuchus, you know, be the only ones to benefit from this because they can consume bones? Or would this allow an Omni or a Herrera to consume bones? And if they were allowed to consume bones, would it give them hunger? Would it give them nutrients? Probably not give them nutrients, but would it allow them to get hunger back from bones without negative side effects? Because if it did, even if it didn't give you diets, but it allowed you just to stave off starvation, that alone would make this a really good perk for carnivores, because it would really allow you to spec into a scavenger niche with, say, Herrera or Pteranodon, where you could, you know, pick bones apart without, you know, taking damage, without getting sick from them. Would allow you to survive better, you know, give you that little bit of an edge, because sometimes, you know, you're starving and you find a pile of bones and you can't do anything with it. I once had a Carnotaurus that barely survived, like, starvation off of eating multiple bones, and it was sick and everything was awful, but I mean, a mutation like this would allow you to survive without getting sick and having to deal with vomit sickness, if that's indeed how it functions. So, depending on the specifics of that one, that could be very, very good for increasing your survivability, increasing the opportunities to eat that you have. So, definitely keeping an eye on that one. Constricted glands, reduced scent trail, specifically blood/excrement. So, okay, first off, poop confirmed in the aisle. That's right, fellas, poop is confirmed, but how useful is this? So we can't do a good judgment of how good it is at reducing the scent trail of excrement, because we don't have that in the game. We can't really do an assessment of that, but blood in particular, that could be good. Because let's say, I mean, if you put this in combination, so let's say you have this on a galley. You can sit down to not bleed out. So you won't bleed out if you sit down. And you give that to a galley, and you give this on top of that, and it reduces the blood trail. That would allow galley to survive omnis much better, because they'd be able to run away as far as they can go, you know, running their blood out pretty much, and then sit down so that they cannot bleed out. But because their blood trail is reduced, the Omnis will have a harder time tracking it down. This could have some interesting use cases. Definitely something to make you more survivable if you like running away from your problems. Pattern recognition, able to decipher human writing. Now, this is one where, of course, we don't have any human writing, and we have no idea how in future versions of the game what benefit there will be to human writing. I really can't give an assessment of this, because we just don't have any of the things that it would be interacting with. On face value, it seems like it'd be worthless. Like, what would reading human stuff allow us to do? The only thing I can think of is if it would allow you to open doors, or like input like keycard codes or something. Like, I'm not really sure, though. Very interesting nonetheless, an interesting concept of a mutation. Hyperreflexia, reduced stagger recovery time. That is actually huge. We've seen from Diabloceratops gameplay that it has stagger features to it, where it like knocks stuff over, flips them, staggers them. We already have some things that stagger, like Herrera jumping on something like an Omni, throws it to the ground or staggers it. You have Tinno kicking a Carno, staggering it. You have Carno charging a Tinno, staggering it. So that is a very useful mutation, because stagger can be absolutely deadly whenever you're just stuck in place, input locked, you can't do anything. And that might be a must pick for a lot of things if you're dealing with stuff that will stagger you consistently. Stereopsis, can see further when zooming in. Now that's an interesting one, because we don't know exactly what it means. Are we going to get a zoom feature like you see in Arma, for example, where you can just really zoom in? Or is it that we can zoom the camera in more? Like, if you go like into practically first person with your dinosaur's camera, will it then keep zooming in even further? Like, you got like binocular vision kind of thing going on? Or even unlock a zoom feature maybe? Because that, imagine that on like Pteranodon, where you can just zoom in to see what's going on the ground, spot, food, spot predators from a distance. An excellent idea for a mutation, just something that affects gameplay in a little way, but can really help you out. Love the idea, and we just have to see how it is, because we don't know exactly what it's referring to, and it's not in the game right now. Cache propensity. Carry/drag larger foods. Carrying food and sprinting takes less stamina. Drag food faster. It's firmly a quality of life thing, but I'm struggling to think of when you would take this over flat damage boosts, flat survivability boosts, let's think, okay, what wants to carry/drag larger foods? Carnivores. Specifically, herbivores don't want to drag food around at all. Maybe Ceratosaurus is what we're thinking of. Right, Ceratosaurus wants to, carry and drag its food around. It wants to make a big corpse pile, as all Ceratosauruses wont to do. Sure, you can carry bigger stuff, so let's assume that, Ceratosaurus can just carry around drag a Stegocorpse even. Okay, that's pretty big, you can move it around, you can carry food and sprint. So notice that carrying food and sprinting takes less stamina. Now, I'm assuming that means that you're sprinting while carrying food, because if that means sprinting in general takes less stamina, that would be something else entirely. And that's why I think it's tied to sprinting while carrying food. So, yeah, that's a interesting one. Drag food faster. Okay, right, so it costs less stam to drag food, and you drag food faster. And I've said it before that they need to change, the stamina drain and the speed of dragging food, because it's just not worth it, really. And I don't know if the fix is to add a whole mutation that just makes it bearable. When you could get all these cool abilities, you can get all these interesting things that change your gameplay, just doing one little thing that's a small quality of life, change, I don't think is worth it. Because just think about it. When was the last time you needed to drag food somewhere? When was it really important to drag food? And it's very niche. It's very niche. Meanwhile, when was the last time you needed more damage in a fight? a lot. When was the last time you needed less hunger drain or less thirst drain? A lot. And that's what this stuff is competing with. So, interesting idea. Like, I like it as an idea, and quality of life things can work as mutations. I like that as an idea, but for dragon stuff specifically, less so. Very much less so, unfortunately. Even if this was in the game right now, I would probably never take it. Enhanced digestion. Decrease nutrition decay rate. We already have a decrease rate of hunger, and from my very limited experience, it didn't throw nutrition out of whack. It didn't throw the diets out of whack, having all of that slower food drain. So maybe you would take this with that if it does prove that to be worse, if you have slower food drain, but then you just unable to keep your diets up because your food isn't draining fast enough. That would be extremely annoying. And would you really take a whole nother slot just for that? I mean, in general, pretty good. I would, as a herbivore for sure, I would definitely take that over the less food drain though, because just the ability to keep your diets up is huge when you're growing. And once we have elders and such in the game, it'll be even more important to keep up good diets throughout your whole life. So would be extremely useful, especially take that just immediately so that you can get your sanctuary mushrooms and just keep that all that nutrition for as long as possible. Or even just as a juvie carnivore, keep that first little bit of diets that you get for as long as possible. Yeah, when they add this in, I imagine it will be a very solid survival mutation to pick. Okay, I've said this many times now, but here's a really interesting one. Multi-chambered lungs reduce stamina regeneration threshold. Okay, now that's something. I'm assuming that this is referring to the threshold at which you regenerate stamina while trotting. Because if so, that means that you would be able to sprint for more than... right now, isn't it roughly 60-ish%? Or... nah, it's 60%, yeah. At roughly 60% stamina right now, you will still regenerate your stamina while trotting. So you can sprint, until you're down to 60%, and then trot and regenerate up. And you can kind of move around a little bit faster doing that. In fights, it can be important to recognize when you're above or below that threshold. So possibly a very good mutation, very good for travel, possibly has combat considerations. I mentioned earlier, stamina is a big thing that affects combat. And it depends on, where does it change the threshold to? Does it just change the threshold to 50? Does it change it to 40? Because if so, it depends on how powerful it is. It could definitely change your fighting style. You could be a bit more liberal with running, with throwing attacks whenever you can regen from higher levels. Or it just gives you more of a buffer to work with. So, yeah, that's possibly a very, very good one. Augmented tapetum? I think that's how you pronounce that. Have increased vision at night. So, of course, the effectiveness of this, the value of it, is dependent on how much further it lets you see at night. But assuming that's just a decent amount, could be good. Could definitely be good. Pteranodon could possibly really benefit from it, just to try to make up for its lack of good night vision. This would possibly be a must-have for already nocturnal things. Just double down, be able to see a mile whenever you have night vision on. Would really allow you to definitely plan things out, have more information than your prey. That's the big thing with nocturnal hunters, is what you rely on is that you have more information than your prey. You can see them when they can't see you, and this assists in that. Cannibalistic. Oh boy, here's one. For species that are not, by default, cannibals, adds their own species as a preferred prey for nutrients. There are two ways to look at this. So the first way is just the fact that you can be a cannibal. Think Cannibal Carno, Cannibal Omni, Cannibal Troodon even. And I don't like that, really. The thing is, some things are like Omni are supposed to be pack hunters that are cooperative. And when you add the element of they can take the cannibalistic perk and then just hunt their own kind in a mirror match, and they can take that other thing that makes, intra-species conflict, they win. I mean, Raptor is already, you pounce the guy first, you win, in terms of fights. I can see things becoming very toxic, very bad with that. I feel like it would need some major drawback, like some visible way to tell that another Raptor is a cannibal, because otherwise everyone's gonna become, all raptors are just gonna become paranoid wrecks that just can't trust any of their own species, and you won't really see randoms form raptor packs because they're too paranoid of each other, and that would be pretty unfortunate. Though another thing, though, on the less pessimistic side, looking optimistically at it, cannibalistic would be a great survival perk. Just because, so if you have a pack of raptors and you try to fight a stego, let's say, stego kills a couple of you and you just can't kill it, you don't have the means to, you're starving, oh hey, you have the corpses of your pack mates. It's basically like Legacy, and you can eat your dead pack mates. That's actually extremely good for survivability. It opens up a whole new food source to you. So if we're looking at it from the less, toxic cannibaloling, kind of thing, this could be really good just for packs to stay alive by, eating any of them that die. So could be, an S-tier survival perk just for that, but I have a feeling with how some of the community is that this thing will be quite problematic. And on the other hand, I'm not too much of a fan of it because it takes away the specialness of some of the playables that are cannibalistic. It's kind of special that Ceratosaurus and Deinosuchus are cannibals, and that's a big part of their playstyle because they have that, inherently. So just allowing any carnivore to be cannibalistic is a bit, I don't know. I mean, if we were to just have it as is, just my personal suggestion is just to not give it to raptors and Druidons, social things, perhaps. Things that you want to pack hunt. Meanwhile, Carnos and such, you can give it to them. So it instills some, fear back in the Carnos from their cannibal days, but not make them, inherently cannibals, like Serat and Dano. But that would get rid of the one positive thing I was but I don't know, it's complicated. I could probably make a whole video about this trait and all the effects it could have. So, complicated. That's just the one word to describe what that could be. Heightened Ghrelin. Increase overeating capacity by a large amount. Will now automatically stop eating when full instead of vomiting. Increase overeating capacity by a large amount. For Sarah and Dano, we don't have this in the game right now. We don't know exactly what it does, just speculating here. I mean, those things can already overeat for all eternity, so I'm assuming that this applies to normal things, so normal things can eat? Just overeat? Not really sure how useful it is, because overeating doesn't get you nutrients as far as I know, so I don't really have much to say about that. With my current knowledge, it seems like it'd be worthless, but maybe there's something more to it. Pit Organ. Can see sources of infrared light. A very interesting mutation. I imagine this is geared towards human gameplay. I believe it was mentioned on a dev stream. This being a mutation specifically to see humans using infrared light. Humans that are using night vision, for example, because a lot of people don't know, night vision, goggles, a lot of the time, they're not just seen in the dark for free. They just basically have a flashlight on them that's spewing out infrared light, which humans, we as humans can't see infrared light, so it's spewing out invisible light that the goggles translate into visible light for you. And that's how, night vision works for us. So that we can see. But there are animals that can see infrared light. So you could have, you can have a Rugops or something, or an Omni, or heck, even Troodon, that you think you're a human being all stealthy in the woods. You think nothing can see you and you can see all because you have night vision. But as it turns out, you've just lit the beacons of Gondor for some dinosaur that can see infrared light and you're not being stealthy at all to them. That is a very interesting mutation. Definitely something you'd want if you were going into a human hunting niche once they have, humans and more dinosaurs in the roster in the future. Very interesting. Definitely keeping an eye on that one. Prolific reproduction. Your babies have increased health and stamina regen. Your babies require less food. Your babies grow faster. Wow. Okay, so that is the must-have nesting perk. And we don't know how this applies. Are all of these bonuses going to be just when they're babies? Just whenever they're, juvies? Is it something they get their entire life? Now, it says specifically babies in the text, so maybe it's only until they reach juvie, which even still, well, think again, increased health and stamina regen doesn't matter to babies because you get one shot by everything, so, that would be just completely worthless, really, so... Right, if we're assuming it's just babies, somewhat good, babies require less food, they grow faster, so just anything that increases growth is absolutely amazing. So having that, you can get them up to juvie, get them independent faster. Okay, pretty good. Requires less food during that time, right? You have to spend less food feeding them. So already it's somewhat good even if it just is the baby stage. But if it goes up to juvie or even above, then that's really good. Increased health and stamina regen, just for your entire life or a good portion of it, requires less food, growing faster. If you have a permanent growth boost, or at least just a growth boost through juvenile even, very powerful. Now, of course, this is a perk that would benefit you, not at all really. It's a mutation to benefit your offspring. So it's a very altruistic thing to take. So you're not benefiting from it, but anyone you nest in is benefited by it. So, this is something to give your friends an easier time nesting them in. Very interesting, very cool. I like mutations that go into nesting because it just feeds into, the mechanic that mutations is tied to, which is nesting. I'd probably take this a lot if I was, planning to nest and such. Paratrepsis, able to fake fractures. Specifically, you could set up an ambush, maybe? Fake a fracture, make some noise, and then, descend on anyone that is trying to attack you, though the thing is faking a fracture. You making all the noise already attracted the predator that didn't know you were fractured, so... Or you may be gonna do a whole killdeer thing, try to draw away someone who thinks you're weak with the fake fractures thing. Though the moment that you, unfake your fracture, they're gonna know, oh, they took that mutation, they're not actually weak. Though then again, you'd be surprised how many people would not know that that's a thing, or not recognize it, and they'd just be like, what the heck, why is this guy, he's fractured, but he's getting away from me? And I'd be confused. I don't know, maybe extremely niche cases, but still a cool mutation. Well, it's an interesting mutation also because it's not really a physical ability, but it's more of a mental ability. Your dinosaurs learned to do this, action, which is pretty cool. I'd like some stuff more, some more stuff like that would be interesting. Cochlear sensitivity, indication of sound traps from a distance. So that's an interesting one. So I imagine that's the natural alarms, I want to say? Unless, though it's not called natural alarms, it's called sound traps. So either they're both referring to the same thing, or sound traps are different from natural alarms, so possibly indicating, maybe humans would have sound traps, and you could get an indication, of where they are so you can avoid them. Because this kind of seems like it would be... If it is talking about natural alarms, then this would just be a straight upgrade of that, because instead of having a chance to not trigger them, you just avoid them entirely, which is a 100% chance of not triggering them if you don't get near them. So that possibly is specifically for human-made traps, if we're reading this right. So, once again, another mutation where if you wanted to go into a human hunting niche, once such a thing is possible, that could be good. And finally, we have remodeling ambulation. Movement regenerates leg fractures faster than resting. So you break your leg, from a fall or something, you don't have to sit down and wait, you can just keep going. So, that can be the difference between life and death in some instances where you just need to move. But you do have to think, what is the use case for this? It's either falling or, a packy, hit you in the leg and ran off. So, maybe once we have some bigger things that do fractures, who knows really? Definitely increases your quality of life in that regard, but how often do you break your legs, though? Like, where this would be useful to take as a full mutation, So possibly is good for those who are vertically challenged and cannot evaluate terrain accurately, people like that. But, we'll see. Okay, and with that, I have recorded 2 hours of me rambling. My throat hurts. I am going to cough up a lung from this. So yeah, I guess I'll just leave off with some opinions on the mutation system, and I guess what I'll be doing next. So for one thing, mutations are awesome. Just having something that you work for. Like, you're not just growing your dinosaur. Now you're picking and choosing mutations, trying different combos. We're getting a little bit more of a gameplay loop. We're getting like, we can try different things with the same dino. We can try different builds. We have more interesting things going on. We have, some mutations, encounters, and combos. Like, it's fun, it's interesting. Though how much of that is just because it's new is part of the question. But the fact that mutations go into the nesting system, nesting finally has a use. Before, nesting was worthless. It was beyond worthless. It was 100 times better to spawn just from the spawn screen than to nest. But now with mutations, nesting is viable. Nesting is back. Because now, well, for one thing, you can take mutations to make nesting less painful. So you can really spec into nesting if you want. And on top of that, you give your offspring traits. So your friends who are nesting in, or just randoms you're nesting in, they will have better traits. They can decide to go, okay, I've already got this mutation, I can pick something else. So now there's encouragement to nest. And I'm assuming later on, successive generations will be able to have even more, not just one mutation, but 2 or even 3 mutations inherited. Like, that, it's gonna be crazy. You're gonna want to be nested in. You're gonna want to go through the hassle of being nested in because you're going to have a dinosaur that is more versatile, is better at surviving, just out of the virtue of having free mutations. Like that's amazing. We have a gameplay loop, finally, in that regard. And Elders is something that's coming up eventually, that we're gonna get, and that will close the loop of your life cycle. And I think it's gonna be great. Mutations are a fantastic addition. Even with, I'm not playing Dibble right now, because it's all just messed up right now. Mutations alone is having me play the Hordetest, doing a bunch with it, because they're just great. Even in their, crazy state with stuff being broken and changed constantly, because, Hordetest, that's what it's for. So yeah, they're absolutely fantastic, and we are going to get species-specific ones in the future. I can't wait. I'm probably gonna make a whole video just, looking at different ideas for it. There's nothing else I can say that I haven't already said. But yeah, if you have sat through me talking about mutations for 2 hours now, I'll probably post some gameplay of the Hordetest soon, probably have a few more discussion videos. Just playing the Hordetest has got me thinking about a lot of different things. So yeah, expect more Isle content. For the 10 people or so that have been watching the Stellaris stuff, if you even watch any of the Isle stuff I do, that stuff's moving from, Monday, Friday upload schedule to just Friday, because now I've got to play a lot more Isle and make more Isle videos, so yeah, those are going to go a bit on the back burner, and Isle uploads are going to be a bit more consistent. So yeah, that's just about it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.